Good afternoon, everyone, and firstly, thank you for the invitation and to come and talk to you guys. By way of introduction, John Landwehr, DFS, Department of Fire and Emergency Services, Aviation Services. I've been with the department for 27 years, and of the last 16, I've been involved in aviation as a air attack supervisor, aerial observer, and for the last 6 years as DFS's full-time air operations officer. So my primary role, Monday to Friday, is to make sure that when the bells go off, the sirens go off, that we've got aircraft staff and pilots in the airframes ready to roll. Presentation this afternoon, just wrapping up a fire up at Bullsbrook, which ran through the PS Air Base that some of you might be familiar with, flying in and out of across the couple of taxiways and the main runway. So the presentation this afternoon is just about DFS Aviation Services, our capability. As you're all aviators in the room, have a look at our toys that we play with, both our rotary and fixed-wing aircraft, and a bit of explanation of how we manage our airspace when we're flying. Flyers, obviously, fire, we're close to the ground level, so flights above AGL, and how we stack our aircraft, certainly in controlled airspace along the scarp there, where we're limited to 3,500 feet before you start getting into controlled airspace. Just by way of, I suppose, a disclaimer, I'm not a pilot. So if I'm talking pilot speak and I'm wrong, stick your hand up. I've just been in aviation for 16 years as a practitioner in a left-hand seat as aircrew, but now as more in a managerial role. So I hope I can regale you with some stories and give you a bit of information about DFS Aviation Services. So DFS Aviation Services, we're really young in our aviation history in DFS. We've only been doing it since 1996, where we started a trial with the old radial piston Dromadeer air tractors, the agricultural aircraft. We did a trial period for the Scarp and the pine plantations, and since 1996 it's just evaluate, assess, look at capability gaps, and where do we move forward from there. So within DFS Aviation we have 5 portfolios. We have our staff, so we run seasonal aircrew that sit in left-hand seats of rotary and fixed-wing aircraft that provide supervision, aerial observation, aerial intelligence, manipulating or using cameras and mapping systems, electronic surveillance devices. Our air desk, so unfortunately in 2012, 2013 we burned a few homes down in Rolling Stone and Margaret River, and we had a Kelty report, a ex-police commissioner report, and he pretty much said between the two departments, Department of Fire and Emergency Services and Parks and Wildlife, or now DBCA, you've got to sort your shit, pull yourself together, have a single point of coordination, a single point of coordination and dispatch of all your aerial assets. So the State Operations EDS was born, so that forms one of our portfolios. A lot of people don't realise that within DFS, we also manage our 3 rescue helicopters, our 2 based here at Jandakot and our 1 based at Bunbury Airport. So that's another stream and a portfolio that I look after as well. Our AISR, Aerial Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance. So that's our aerial observation, aerial intelligence gathering platforms. We have a rotary platform for our tactical stuff, a Dauphine AS365, which we'll talk about later. And last year and this year, we've got a B200 King Air with remote sensing capability that's based here this year at Jandakot. Our air attack, that's all our firefighting assets, so our fixed-wing aircraft, our rotary aircraft, our aerial observation and air attack supervisory platforms. But it's also our utility aircrafts. We run a series of aircraft that are capable of flying firefighters, equipment, heavy rescue equipment, specialist USAR or hazmat equipment around the state to support emergency management. And that falls in that air mobility role. So within DFS, we've got those 5 functional areas, and hopefully we service the state for all our HMA responsibilities. Our structure within DFS, it's a very small team that looks after aviation. So DFS Aviation looks at about 14 to 16% of DFS's entire budget. So annually you're looking around the $37 to $40 million budget for us. Down the bottom you'll see myself at the lowest common. I'm an air operations officer. I look after the aerial intelligence stream, but also go hand in hand with Troy, my counterpart, for the air attack. So between the 2 operations officers, we run the day-to-day functions of all our aerial assets, which we'll see shortly. We report up through to an air operations manager. That person's position, Adam, is responsible for all the compliance and contracts and making sure that we've got the right aircraft to do the right jobs in the state. He then reports up to a superintendent who previously was a director of aviation services, Derek Park. Some of you may have encountered Derek over the years. He's ex-military, ex-aviator, and he provides that aviation corporate knowledge, the governance, understanding CASA regulations. For example, we know we want to go firebombing at night. Currently, CASA puts some limitations on that. Terry or Derek and the predecessor, the one we let off the chain to go fight CASA to make it happen for us, to get all the approvals and legislation in place so we can go flying at night. And we report up through the system, all the way up through Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Clem. On any given day, my week this week, we run a state duty aviation roster. So from any aviation-related topics or requests that come through the state for any emergency management, goes through this position. Currently I'm on that position, so I'm State Department of Fire and Emergency State Aviation Officer. So any requests for aircraft, any requests for support or an incident with aircraft, we want to move firefighters to the east coast to support the fire activities there, come through me. That's why if my phone rings, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go. How we do our business? So we're covered under the couple of acts, the Emergency Management Act 2005, the Bushfires Act 56 and the Fire Brigades Act 42. And those acts cover us legally to do what we do. Land on a road, take water from any known point. It's funny, under the 42 Act, we can take water from anywhere other than water that supplies the school. So back in the day when schools were fed by tanks and dams, and that's still written in the Act. But yeah, so the Act protects us and allows us to do our job, allows us to not break the law, but obviously, you know, if we want to land on the road, you just can't go land on the road, but we can under the Act, under an emergency situation. Other supporting documents within DFES, the state has a fire plan called West Plan Fire, and that sets out our tasking priorities. So our tasking priority for our aircraft are exactly the same as the tasking priorities for the fire trucks. It's in the prevention of life, property, critical infrastructure, and then the environment. So if we're getting those real shitty days when we're getting multiple requests for aircraft, we prioritise them based on life, property, critical infrastructure, and the environment. And that's no different to what we do with the trucks. That way, as I said, when the air desk is receiving multiple requests, they at least have a structure to prioritise tasking. Because we don't have any infinite resource, we've got only a small number of aircraft, and we need to prioritise them accordingly. Our toys, this is what you all wanted to see anyway, isn't it? Okay? Yeah. As I said, I'm not an aviator, I know a little bit about the aircraft because I've been a little bit more, and I'm sure you'll be able to give me some good oil. Most of you guys are fixed-wing pilots, I assume? 8 helicopters? Nah. WA is a big sandpit, 2.5 million square kilometres. We need a lot of toys in that sandpit, and there's no one aircraft, fixed wing or rotary, that does the job. So we need a mix. So in the state, we are very lucky to have a really small mix of aircraft that meet our needs. Let's have a look at a couple of them. On the left, as you're looking at, our Bell 214B Helitac. That's our medium helicopter. Bit of story of these helicopters, 22, 24, depending who you speak to. Were built for the Shah of Iran, so they're purposely built for his army in high altitude, high temperature. Makes them perfect for firebombing operations. They're the biggest single-engine helicopter in the world, the only single-engine helicopter in the world that can lift their own weight. So fuel on the ground without the belly tank, they're 2,600 kilos, they can lift a 2,700 kilo payload. So pretty much from go, they're not subject to all the typical temperatures, wind, altitude that aircraft suffer. So bar the first couple of sighting drops, they can give us that full 2,700 litres every time. As I said, they're a single engine airframe, single pilot. The tank holds 2,700 litres. It fills that tank from a hydraulic pump that's dispatched via a hose sitting under here. That can be released, deployed, and as long as we've got a water point that is about a foot deep and about 20 metre rotor arc distance, we can go into that water point, and about 40 seconds later we have that 2.7 tonne of water on board. And we can continue operations as we go. One of the biggest logistical things of these, they drink about 600 litres of fuel an hour. So whenever we dispatch them, we need to dispatch a mobile fuel support. So whenever we dispatch aircraft in this format, whether it's the Helitacs or the 802 air tractors on the right, we dispatch them in a pair, and they get also dispatched with a fuel truck to go out and site. We have 6 of these in state, 4 based at Jandakot here and 2 based down at Bunbury, and they're dispatched to the state air desk. They are on task for fire operations, so they're not in a restricted category. But if we want to start using, they do have the ability to move up to 10 people. If we want to start using for crew transport or utility work, it has to go through the state, me, to get that approval. Yes?
I don't know whether you know the answer to it or not. You talk about them picking up water out of only a foot deep, so obviously you don't want to bury the hose in the dirt, neither you want to pull it out. But if the aeroplane is taking on 2 and a bit tonnes of weight, how does the pilot compensate for this, or does he have a system that does that for us?
Yeah, basic skill, yeah, I did hear that, yeah, absolute skill, but they've got a little gauge. So as the gauge is going up, they're increasing power, just to maintain the level steady. We are blessed to have in WA all the contractors, McDermott Aviation with the helitax, Ericsson Aircrane with the Skycrane Aircrane there, and Dunn's Aviation with fixing. Their pilots fly all around the world, so when they're not on contract in WA, they're in Greece or France or Canada or America flying, so that's their business, so they do well. Obviously, if you're bringing 3 tonne onto your airframe, you have to compensate it for it. And that's probably the most dangerous time in our operation, is when they're full of water and trying to get forward transition out of the water point. If they lose wind on the nose, then they have to dump the water and climb out. So that's our Bell 214, our helitax, 6 of them in state. In the centre then is our air crane, S64 air crane and Ericsson air crane. You'll see it's an E model. They have 2 models, a 64F, the Ferrari model, which is a 9,000 litre capacity tank. The E model, economy model, is a 7,000 litre, so 7 tonne of water. We have one of these in state, based down at Serpentine. It gives us that 7,000 litres. You'll note down there the fill times. So it has 2 fill methods. It has the same as this, what they call a pond pump, which can be deployed into a water depth of about a foot and a half, and again about 40 seconds later, it's got 7 tonne of water on board that can be deployed. As long as it's got rotor arc clearance into any static water point, whether it be a soak, a river, a dam, or even a tank with the lid off, they can take it. But the air crane has the unique ability to deploy what's called a ram snorkel. And when that's deployed, that can be dragged along with a couple of little aerofoils and 75mm intakes, and that can be dragged along any body of water, and that can draft up that 7 tonne of water in about 18 to 20 seconds. That allows the air crane the unique ability over the other airframes to take salt water. Because if you can imagine in the helitax situation with a pond pump deployed, it goes down into a hover, into the water point. The rotor wash pushes the salt back in, not only into the intakes but also onto the screen, the visors. So when you fly over the flight, the heat crystallises the salt and you lose visibility. With the sea snorkel, it allows that forward momentum, so all the sea spray remains behind the intakes or behind the airframe, so it allows it to pick it up. So that's a unique feature of it. 2-pilot operation, flies with an engineer, heavy on the maintenance and heavy on the fuel. We talked about 600 litres for the helitax there. Anyone want to have a guess how many the air crane burns an hour? Did I hear someone say 2,000 litres? Great answer. Yeah, so that burns about 2,000 litres an hour of fuel. So it's, when we deploy it, it's really logistics to maintain the service. It's the only aircraft we have that can deliver that body of water, point to point, but it does drink a lot of fuel. And on the right, our HG Holden of the fleet, for me, our 802 air tractor. It's our fastest aircraft in our fleet, gives us 3,100 litres of water every time. It's our only aircraft that can sit on the ground loaded, can't land loaded, but can sit on the ground loaded. Whereas helitax, they can't land or take off with water on board, they have to pick it up en route while they're in flight. Our 802 air tractors, once they land, they can turn around, park up, fill up, ready to be dispatched immediately. We get a call to the pilot jumps in, turns the key, and away they go. You know, a really good aircraft, gives a good body of water for us, 3,150 litres every time, and they're quick and really good endurance, gives us about 4.5 hours over the fire ground that we can use them. Of all these models, all the tank systems are computer modulated. So for example, the air crane with its 7,000 litres, we can actually put in 7 1,000 litre drops if we wanted to, or 2 3,500 litre drops. We can split the drops to meet the need on the fire ground. Any questions about our firefighting aircraft?
Why is that called an HG Holden?
Because it's basic.
Oh, okay.
It's very basic. The HG, HQ Holden, the LJ Tirana, the Gemini. Ford Model T. It's very basic, just a basic airframe, nothing glamorous about them, but they get in and reliable, easy to maintain. You can fix them up with fencing wire and a bit of blue tack. Whereas the helicopters, they're a little bit more finesse. How we coordinate it, so we have coordination aircraft, so our supervisory aircraft, we have a couple of Squirrels, helicopters, a twin Squirrel, and a Champion Scout, which some of you may be familiar with. We use them for aerial observation, but also coordination of the fireground. So whenever we dispatch any of our firefighting assets, we dispatch a supervisor to sit above the fireground and coordinate that airspace, making sure people are coming in and out appropriately, making their inbound, outbound calls, and directing the water onto the fireground. And so we've got a mix of light utility helicopters and Champion Scouts. Interestingly, aircraft drinks 2,000 litres of fuel an hour, the Scout about 33 litres an hour. And when you're over the fireground doing your donuts, your circles, you can drop that back to about 15 litres an hour. So a really economical aircraft, gives you about 6 and a bit hours endurance over a fireground if you've got a strong enough bladder. When it goes pear-shaped, and we need assistance from the East Coast, and this year I can announce that we actually have this Ericsson Donald Douglas MD-87 in state up at Pierce for the first time in the state's history that we've had a large air tanker. Large air tankers come in a variety of, they call them LATs, large air tankers. They do come in VLATs, very large air tankers, which is a DC-10, and we also have MEETs, which are medium-engined, multi-engine air tankers, sorry. So we currently have this MD-87 in Pierce, gives us around 11,000 litres worth of product. Really a good versatile airframe. We're still trying to understand its capability, but it's not a panacea. It just gives another tool in that toolbox to use on the fireground. It's dropped 11,000 litres, gives you a footprint of product on the ground about 350 metres by about 20 metres wide on a coverage level 4. All the drop tanks are computer modulated, so we can give you 11 1,000 litre drops if required. That's supported by a Turbo Commander, which is our air attack platform. As you can imagine, these things drop at about 300 feet at about 280 k an hour, whereas the 802 air tractors are about 70 feet at 70 knots. So they're a little bit faster, a little bit higher, so we need a faster supervisory platform to come through. So typically we have an aero commander with a supervisor in it, and that's dispatched whenever we dispatch as a package. New South Wales have bought one of these, a 737, a massive big fireliner, or as they call it, an airliner. But it's only got 15,000 litres of product, so they've got a massive big airframe for what I believe is a small payload. The advantage of the 737, it also can take up to 65 firefighters on board. So it can fly from an airstrip to airstrip, land, unload the firefighters to go to the fireground, and then support those firefighters with drops from the fireground. So it's a good aircraft, large aircraft, has a good speed and range, but for mine, very expensive to operate for only 15,000 litres. An example of that is yesterday up at Pierce, with our 6 802 air tractors that were working and our 4 helitacs, we had a combined total of about 30,000 litres of suppressant we could put down. If we brought in the one large air tanker on the left there, 11,000 litres. So effectively we were holding out 30,000 litres of product delivery for one 11,000 litre drop. So it's not really an efficient use of resources. So they're the sort of decisions that the supervisor makes when resourcing firegrounds. Those that have been around long enough, 2015 we actually brought in to the state to support fires at Boddington and Northcliffe down in the south, the RJ85 and the Herc. Again, great utility platforms, RJ 11,000 litres of product, the Herc 13,000 litres or 15,000 litres of product. Good airframes, good at what they do, just another resource. We don't have any of these in state. Likewise the DC-10, that gives you 45,000 litres of product in one drop. So what they're saying, retardant, which is the orange stuff that you see coming out, that's about $1 a litre to drop. So it's already got $45,000 worth of product on board, so you don't want to waste that. So you're looking at per drop, you're looking at about $100,000 plus just to fly this thing. It drinks about 10,000 litres of fuel an hour. So it's an expensive resource, it's a good resource. I use it extensively throughout Europe and the Americas, but we won't see one in WA, I don't think, for a little while. So these are accessible to us just on a national sharing arrangement. Also in our fleet, we have our ISR capability, so our AS365 Dauphine. That's got a Westcam MX10 camera. Those, if you want to, it's got a infrared normal day TV. It's got laser rangefinder, laser illuminator. Can read number plates from 20 k's away. We use it for mapping the fire and identifying fire edges, rates of spread, fuel loading, assets under threat. That's piloted, single pilot, but we have 2 DFS air intelligence staff in there. They operate the intelligence systems and the mapping systems, able to provide live vision down to the fire ground or into the incident management team or the State Operations Centre, provide mapping, and that's some of the sort of imaging that you see from it. And our Beechcraft, our King Air, that's got a remote sensing capability, so that's for out of the metro area. The rotary aircraft give you, as you know, rotary are really good for short duration point to point. If you want to go longer distance, then you need a fixed wing aircraft that can get you. But then on the downside of that, the fixed wing can only land the strip. Helicopter can put you point to point where you need them. So again, no one aircraft is better than the other. The King Air provides us with line scanners, so they fly at about 12,000 feet, do a scan of a fire. Typical scan is about 30 kilometres long by about 12 kilometres wide, and produces this image. So from there, the incident controllers can identify where the active fire is, and our geospatial support unit can then map and provide maps to the fires.
One of the greatest assets we have in the metro area anyway is our air intelligence aircraft with its infrared camera. Flying over a fire ground, as you can see here, everyone there is the boss of the fire, so yeah, we're pretty happy that's out. We flick the IR camera on, we can start seeing all the hot spots near untracked edges or outside of tracked edges. So we're using this tool more and more post fires to make sure that the mitigation work's been done right and that the fires are not going to break containment lines. Our rescue helicopter service, so as I mentioned, not many people know within the community that DFS, we actually manage that contract. It's a shared arrangement between 3 agencies. St John Ambulance provide the critical care paramedics that fly on the aircraft. CHC helicopters provide the airframe, pilots and engineering support. And DFS, we manage the contract and provide the basing, the hangarage and all other costs associated with it. The Bell 412 EP, Extra Performance, we have 3 of them. They're all sister ships, they're all wide, like for like, they're all fitted out like for like, all have the same SAR equipment like for like. On any given day, there's one based at Jandakot, one based at Bunbury, and we have a third which is a floater between the 2, and that also covers off on any maintenance. This is a DFS's only truly real 365, 24/7 aerial capability, whereas these are IFR, night rated. All our firebombing operations are all VFR. So we conduct all our firebombing operations, plan to be on the ground 10 minutes prior to last light for VFR rules. We have primary taskings for patient transfer from road crash sites, other emergency sites straight into the hospitals. We are looking at upgrading the 412s. They're not outdated, but they're sort of around the world, they're moving away from this type of helicopter to more friendlier, pilotable and larger helicopters. But unfortunately, Royal Perth Helipad's only rated to a 5-tonne helicopter, so until it's upgraded to 10-tonne, we can't upgrade our helicopter fleet. That's in the process, but it's just a timing thing. Like our helitax, the emergency rescue helicopter services are on a 15 minutes notice to fly. So if they get the call, the contractually they've got to be airborne within 15 minutes. Like our helitax, every time they get the call, it's 15 minutes to get airborne. Our State Operations Air Desk, as I said, in 2012, we had a few incidents, had a report, and pretty much from there, at our State Operations Centre in Coburn, we have a State Operations Air Desk, and that is a single point of dispatch and coordination of aircraft. So none of our aircraft can get airborne without the authority from the State Operations Air Desk. And they decide, based on the information coming in from the requests, on what aircraft is dispatched. On all occasions, they'll dispatch a minimum of 2, but if it's a real shitty day and they're getting a lot of calls come through to a particular incident, they'll send through more aircraft. We run 4 nominated operational bases, one at Jandakot, Bunbury, Manjimup and Albany. So the State Operations Air Desk has full autonomy to dispatch minimum 2 aircraft from any of those nominated bases out to 120k radius. And Barry, great question, why 120k? That's logistics and fuel sport. So we can fly an aircraft from any of those bases to 120k's, still have more than an hour's firefighting fuel on board,
That also allows 2 hours for the fuel truck to get to its furthest point, set up a fuel site, a remote helicopter landing site, and ready to receive the aircraft. So we can maintain continuous fire operations within 120k radiuses of each of the knobs. Once we start going outside of that 120k radius, it just becomes logistically a little bit harder to support operations. It's not saying we won't send aircraft out, just we need to do a bit of pre-planning before we do. To aid in that, we've set up 14 or 39, I think it is now, forward operating bases, these little red dots around here. They're either Parks and Wildlife, local government or privately owned airstrips that we set up some infrastructure that we can support fire operations. So it's a shed with some foam, fuel, oil, etc. that we can set up and help fire operations. How we do our business. Okay, so we've got a fire down there. We establish a area of operations, and with that area of operations, we've got a NOTAM. And I'm sure every pilot in the room has probably seen it. Okay, NOTAM reads, unnotified intense aviation activity associated with firefighting operations may occur within 5 nautical mile radius and below 3,000 feet AGL of observed fires. Aircraft not coordinated through the relevant state fire authority are requested to remain clear. Not required, we only request you remain clear. That's different to other states. Other states are requesting that you remain clear. We only say required. Through your normal CTAF procedures, if you need to get through for whatever reason, you can make contact with the aircraft operating over the fireground and we'll try and expedite your passage through, or say, listen, we're really busy down here, can you get outside that NOTAM area? So that NOTAM's set up, so whenever you're at area 60 and 61, you read that, and that NOTAM runs from 1 November through to the 31st of April as a standard NOTAM for flyers. As we're transiting the fireground, so we transit navally at 1,500 feet AGL, we have 2 calls into the fireground. The first call at 5-minute inbound, so 10 nautical miles. We're still 20 k's from that fireground. The air attack supervisor, or the supervisor of that aircraft, is just asking for strategies, hazards, foam. They're 20 k's away, they're just seeing a column of smoke. They just want to know what part of the fireground they want to go to, what's your strategy, are there any hazards, no one, and can they use foam. So in the aircraft we have water, but we also have a foam additive which enhances the water. Water gives you about 5 minutes of cooling property on the ground. Foam gives you about 20 to 25 minutes of cooling property, and the red retardant, that's a long-term product that until it gets wet again, gives you that fire inhibiting property. So 5-minute inbound, 20 k's away, 10 nautical mile, strategies, hazards, foam. As they transit into the fireground, we'll put our helitax, our rotary aircraft at 500 feet AGL, and then we just stack our aircraft. We put our seats at our fixed-wing aircraft at 1,000, our supervisory platform at 1,500, and our air intelligence platform at 2,500, or as high as we can get. As I said before, when we're on the SCAR, we're already at 1,000 feet AGL, basically. We've got a ceiling height of 3,500 feet through before we get into control. So we want to try and keep our aircraft in that zone, so we don't have to keep going into tower all the time to come in and come out of our fire area. So we just stack it at 500-foot intervals just to avoid any sort of conflict, and that also allows all the aircraft that are flying the fire to be over the top of the fire and observing the fire rather than holding them out horizontally. We'll try for a vertical stack first. If we can't, then we'll go to a horizontal separation stack. How we keep track on things, so we can't just deploy, as you can appreciate, it's an expensive operation to run aircraft, as you all know. So we really keep track on the aircraft and performance-wise. So all our aircraft come with tracking in ADL, aside from Spider Tracks or Tracks Plus, where we can monitor the performance, not only engine and parameters, but also where they're picking water up, where they're dropping water, where they're turning, where they're flying, and this provides evidence for us. So we get it in a couple of formats. We get it in a spreadsheet. So this is McDermott Aviation, one of the Bell 214s on the 3rd of February 2014. On the left-hand column here, it's just these markers here represent something you'll see in the next slide. A latitude, longitude of where they picked the water up, the time, when the pump started and stopped, how long it was on for, 32 seconds, and in 32 seconds it picked up 2,500 litres. And that just correlates over to this line, again with the date, time, the door opening size, so it was at 5%, level for coverage level 5, that long, and how many litres are put in. And that just generates, in the middle here, a summary. So on that given day, that one helicopter in one fuel cycle dropped 153,000 litres of water. So that's the way of building our data and evidence. And we also then can use the next slides, which generate on that spreadsheet on the left hand side, that little marker represents that. So that's where the door started, and that's the drop length there, and that is its altitude. So we can see a door open here, drop, 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 and then bumped up when she was empty. And like on the next slide, we can start building pictures of where they put all the drops in. All these little yellow pins here represent the start of a drop and the data and the drop patterns, and you can start building where they're putting drops into saved properties. A bit hard to see, I would imagine, out the back, but we can see our spaghetti track. So we're following lines. This is really important that we follow the flight profile of the aircraft. We get lots and lots of queries from residents about, blowing tiles off roof or blowing pot plants over, or you've taken water out of my swimming pool and you've cracked my pool, we need a new pool. Believe it or not, the chooks have gone off the lay, So we can use the flight paths to identify whether the aircraft actually flew over the house, whether they actually took a turn over the house, or, they're telling porcupines and suggest you stop with that. So that's really important. But it also, in the early years, and we had a pilot that came into state that was consistently putting in more drops than anyone else. But when you analyse the data, he was putting in less literage than anyone else. So he's using our fireground pretty much as a racetrack to brag that he put in 100 drops a day, but he was only putting in 30,000 litres of water, where everyone was putting in 70,000 litres with 80 drops. So we could use this data to interrogate and then go back to the company and say, listen, we don't believe this pilot's good for us, and he no longer flies in the state for us. And again, this is just another tracking system. So all our aircraft have AVL, vehicle locator, so we get a track every 2 minutes, or on change of direction or change of speed. So this just builds a profile. This was the air crane taking out of the ocean for a fire. So it's just a way of analysing how we do business and how we do it better, and then also for performance evaluation as well. And of course, drones. Who's got a drone? Come on, don't be shy. Come on, you go. Yeah, so they call it an emerging risk. It's a risk to us already. We've had 2 incidents this fire season that we've had a near miss with the drone. Last year we had to suspend 3 operations because of drone activity. One of the firegrounds down in the Esperance. One drone sighting cost, I think it was about 180,000 litres of water being dropped on that fireground, because until we can mitigate it. So we have a solid mitigation policy for drones, SOPs in place, but until we can clearly confirm that the drone sighting has been mitigated, then we can't put manned aircraft in there, especially itinerant drones. So if you're flying a drone out there, we can't fly basically. So, if you see an numpty out there flying a drone near a fireground, tap them on the shoulder and say it's not the best thing. They're in breach of the SOP anyway, or the standard operating conditions set by CASA. You can't fly a drone near an emergency operation anyway. Yep.
What about aircraft or drones that belong to the media?
Yeah, so that they fall into an itinerant aircraft for us, so they've got to abide by that NOTAM. So every year prior to the fire season, we are blessed that we only have the one media chopper now, and that's flown by an ex-Helitac pilot. So we have a really good relationship with them, but it's always about, we can't prevent them from taking their imaging, and we understand they want to get, the shot for the Channel 6 News. So it's all about a conversation with the supervisor. Listen, we're overhead, we're coming in, we want to take the shot. Okay, well, can you just hold out for 5 minutes? We've got 2 drops to go in with the Helitacs. Once they're cleared and heading for the water point, we'll get you in to take the photo and then get you out before the next aircraft comes in. So it's that consultative process, understanding the need of the media, but also they have to be respectful and mindful of our need as well. We've been lucky. We haven't had too many issues with itinerant aircraft. The ones we do have trouble with is we're flying out of the metro area, and local farmers have their own planes and get up, and unbeknownst to us, they're flying around the fireground, having a look at their land tenure, which you understand, but it's also a risk to us. It's very hard to get a conviction, first and foremost. So back when I was on a fire, an example of this, back when I was on a fire truck, we caught a young lad who lit a fire, well, we believe lit a fire. He had ash on his feet, had matches in his pocket, walked out of the fireground. But did we physically see him light the fire? No. He just told us that he used the matches to light his smoke, and he had to walk this way to get home. So it's pretty hard to make a prosecution. What we do know is that fires are lit one of 3 ways. It's either Mother Nature through lightning, or human intervention, either accidental or deliberate. And they're the 3 things we're pretty hard to mitigate against. To prove arson, there's very few arsonists out there, which is a clinical diagnosis. But yeah, you can be prosecuted to deliberately set fire to damage property. And what we do know, back in 2013, 14, I think, the state government legislated that bush, grass, property has a dollar value, and therefore it's the same rule. If they deliberately set fire to damaged property, grass, you can be prosecuted. Currently it's $200,000 or up to 20 years imprisonment for a conviction. Very rarely does anyone get that. The last person that got a serious fine was a few years back when they lit up the pine plantation. He got 7 years. What we do know is that there's a lot of young juveniles that are in juvenile detention for deliberately setting fire as well. But it is hard for the police to prosecute because the police have so many powers now that they can either give them a talking to, send them through to a DFS. We have a juvenile fire awareness program, or a caution or a court order before imprisonment. So they always err on imprisonment as the last resort.
This federal intervention, federal coming in to help you, will that be a help?
It's a help, but it's also a hindrance. So the large air tanker was a federal gift. All well and good giving us an aircraft, but they don't give us the resources or the manpower to stamp it up. So it's really put a draw on an already existing tight roster for us, where we've had to, make and manage do. But actually, we wouldn't have it without federal assistance. Like the line scanner is a one-off gift from the federal government. But as you can appreciate, you get all these products or aircraft capabilities in state. If they don't resource it and provide you the manpower to deal with it, it just makes it hard. But never kick a gift horse in the mouth, I suppose. Thank you very much for allowing me to come and interrupt your luncheon. It's good. It's great to see the enthusiasm still in flying, and you guys are the pioneers for what we have now. So thank you very much, and be safe over the fire season. Thank you very much.